This program was first broadcast on Canterbury's access media station, Plains FM, and was made with the assistance of New Zealand On Air.
It's time for Emergence News on Plains FM 96.9, Citizen-Made Radio.
Kia ora and welcome to Emergence News, part 2 of the Spotlight on Initiates. And if you haven't caught part 1, you can check it out on YouTube, the Share International New Zealand YouTube channel, or you can go to Plains FM community radio station, their website there, and our podcasts, the last 6 months of podcasts are listed there. In the studio with me today is John. Hi, John.
Nigel, how are you?
I'm good. I was really excited by our conversation on the previous program, looking at initiates, and we quickly realised that we needed to put the other material to the side because we've got so much more we need to talk about in regard to those important people on our planet at this time that are shaping our culture and also helping us move from the Piscean age into the new Aquarian age.
Yep.
Here's a quick historical perspective and a recent slice of history regarding Maitreya. He is the world teacher that has returned and the process of his emergence. 1875 was the formation of the Theosophical Society. 1875 to 1890 was the publication of Isis Unveiled and the Secret Doctrine by a Russian woman who was a 4-degree initiate called Helena Blavatsky.
Yes.
1919 to 1949, there was a whole volume of works that were published. They were the Alice Bailey teachings, and she was a British woman.
Yes.
A 3.2 initiate, John.
Wow. That's high.
Yeah. 1921 to 1939, publication of the Agni Yoga teachings by Helena Roerich. Now, she was a 4-degree initiate, and her husband, Nicholas Roerich, who is an amazing artist, he was a 2-degree initiate.
4-degree initiate. That's interesting because Jesus was a 4-degree initiate. Krishnamurti, a 4-degree initiate.
Powerhouses.
Divine people. That's really interesting.
I just want to say at this point, there is no reason at all why you should believe the information and teachings we broadcast on this program. You are not asked to believe them unless, from your own experience, their truth resounds in you.
Yes.
Good words from Dick Larson.
Yes. Yep. I love Dick, and I quote Dick often. The truth will set you free.
Yeah.
Dick Larson.
Yeah. He's a journalist with...
Counsellor, journalist, lecturer.
Yeah.
Very interesting man.
American did he live on the West Coast?
Yeah. LA somewhere.
Okay.
Poor man. It's the only thing he's done wrong is stay on the West Coast. He should have moved to New Zealand. Dick, if you're listening, come and stay with me.
Mind you, we live in the South Island, just a few kilometres away from the Southern Alps. Hey, look, just getting serious again for a moment. This program brings together 2 lines of thinking, the spiritual and the political. We are moving into a period of climax, leading to events that will fundamentally alter life as we know it. Author Benjamin Creme says, tremendous changes are taking place in all areas of our lives, preparatory to the establishment of an entirely new mode of social living and relationship. And that's based on cooperation and sharing. And we've talked about that on many other programs. On the program today, we're talking about initiates. And you're going to be talking about Krishnamurti. We were talking about 4-degree initiates. There are a whole host of very influential people over the years, over history, who have really made a major contribution to our cultures and to our countries. And they're nowhere near a 4-degree initiate. For example, 2 people that are on the list of initiates published by Share International, 2 New Zealanders, are Sir Edmund Hillary and Ernest Rutherford. Ernest Rutherford came from an area just outside Richmond, near Nelson. Mm-hmm. And he did a bit of study at the Art Centre here in Christchurch, and that study, where he discovered the atom is here in Christchurch at the Arts Centre.
Right.
And Ernest Rutherford was a 2-degree initiate, and Sir Edmund Hillary, probably the most famous New Zealander of all time globally, 1.3 initiate, as was his brother-in-arms on the mountain, Norgay Tenzing, 1.3 initiates.
That's interesting. So to do such a phenomenal physical endeavour, they were over the first-degree initiate, right? The first-degree initiate, as we said last program, is the one that is exercising control over the physical vehicle.
But that's the point of evolution at the end of his lifetime.
Yeah, now this is the
So
thing.
as a mountaineer and as an explorer, that could have been all part of his physical process, couldn't it?
Yes. This is the thing that I'm actually interested in. When we look at these list of initiates and their point of evolution, I'd like to know what they were when they came in. Because we know with Krishnamurti that he was a 3-degree initiate, right, when he came into incarnation, right? And by the time he died, he was a 4th degree.
Incredible.
But he had all of that instruction and energetic development from Maitreya, which I've talked about and which he wrote about in his notebooks. Remember, he had 3, at various stages in his life, he wrote diaries. And there's 3 of them that I know of where he talked about his daily experiences. He talked about the benign, he talked about this energy, and I got the impression, and I said it at the time, as though a fist was being pushed through a sock to open it up, to expand it, to receive the energies of Maitreya, because Krishnamurti was being prepared.
He was being trained.
Yes. And his physical structure was being opened up to contain the energy of Maitreya.
And what he describes on a physical
pain.
level.
Oh,
yes.
right.
Headaches.
So that process took him from a 3 to a 4. So when we talk about Sir Edmund Hillary as a 1.3, I wonder what he was when he came on into life.
But look at the impact he made on the world. He went from a quiet man on the land as a beekeeper to, it was at 1953, all of a sudden he was a world-famous man, him and Tenzing Norgay, and he went on to become an explorer. He explored the South Pole, didn't he?
Yes.
He
did all sorts of things, but interestingly enough...
Service in the mountains.
Service to the people of Nepal. Mm. He did, in his later years, he did a huge amount of contribution...
to education and health.
To the people of Nepal.
Yeah. And speaking of education, I've got another interesting comparison for you here, John.
Ooh.
Maria Montessori. Now,
yes.
these are 2 people who, to this day, are influencing a number of the children on the planet.
Yes.
Outside the state system.
Yes.
Well, outside and inside, it depends on the country. Maria Montessori, a 1.65 initiate. Rudolf Steiner was a 2.2 initiate. Now, he was more than just an educator. He was a philosopher. Yes. He was into architecture, agriculture. He was a clever man.
When you look through the lists, you can see that 1.1 to 1.3 or 4 tend to be musicians and artists. 1.7, they tend to be moving into the realm of teaching. And over 2, they tend to be leadership or great teachers. And you can kind of see that. The discussion we had off air, now that I'm talking about 2.2, what was JFK?
2.4.
2.4, right? And when you look at some of his readings, I had the pleasure of going through the JFK library in the States when I was there. Some of the things he wrote, absolutely phenomenal. But last program we talked about when they get past these points of initiation, they're not necessarily watertight. They're not 100%.
They're not saints until they're 3.
They're not saints until they're 3. Yeah. And if you read some of the stuff around JFK, there was definitely some energetic stuff that he was dealing with not so well.
Well, you could say the same about Gandhi.
Yes.
Who
was a, what was Gandhi?
Gandhi was a 2. At the end of his lifetime, he took the 2nd initiation. Now, he was a spiritual leader, through to 1948 in India. Look at the mark, look at the impact he made on
And he was a 2-degree initiate. Isn't that
Nowhere near a 3-degree initiate.
Isn't that phenomenal? So that would tell me. Now, we talked, I think, last program about how long it takes to go from the first initiation to the second initiation.
It's a big
lifetimes
journey.
After lifetimes after lifetimes, because you've got the second initiation is managing this astral emotional focus that we have, the polarization that humanity has. So there's many, many lifetimes through there. So while dealing with that rubbish, Gandhi also changed India.
He also changed the nature of protest.
Yes. And couldn't we learn? Now, I'm a believer in protest, but it needs to be intelligent and focused and peaceful.
And as non-violent as possible.
And what you need if you want to protest is numbers. Gandhi did that. Gandhi galvanised a population.
At the beginning of this program, I mentioned a bit of history, a historical perspective. And the Theosophical Society, originally in the late 1800s through into the early 1900s, became the vehicle for all this information to be released to humanity. And those who picked it up, especially in the early 1900s, the concept of karma and reincarnation was new to many in the West. And that was through the Theosophical Society. Now, here's 3 key people that were involved in that organisation. I mentioned Helena Blavatsky.
Yep.
She was a 4-degree initiate. Right. She was a co-founder with a guy called Charles Leadbeater.
Yes. Leadbeater's the one that discovered Krishnamurti, right?
2.4-degree initiate. Jeffrey Hodgson, 1.6. They're all very influential people.
Yep.
Annie Besant.
Yes.
2.15 initiate.
Now, that's amazing. Annie Besant was deeply involved with
the
discovery and training of Krishnamurti, right? And almost treated him like her own child. Her and Leadbeater saw him. Now, Leadbeater's quoted as saying that when he looked at the child, Krishnamurti, he had a very clear aura. And so when we look at Leadbeater, what was he? He was a 2.4.
Charles Leadbeater, 2.4 initiate.
2.4. Annie Besant was a 2.1. So they were elevated individuals. They were individuals that were managing their physical, managing their emotion, and probably developing some real spiritual power, right? Of course, the trick with developing spiritual power is not to become attached to it. Even the good stuff, don't become attached to it, right? Honesty, sincerity, and detachment. But yes, there was no coincidence there. When we talk about incarnation and when we talk about karma and we talk about a plan for evolution, Leadbeater and Besant finding Krishnamurti and then training him. There was no coincidence there.
That's right. A good detective says that. I don't believe in coincidences.
Right. Yeah. He also says follow the money.
Okay, just a couple more examples. We've talked a fair bit about Krishnamurti already because you were going to cover
Nigel, I was.
On the last program, you mentioned Krishnamurti as a 4-degree initiate, but we've covered a lot about him.
We're in the swamp here.
But, we were talking about the collective evolutionary growth of the early theosophists.
Yes.
Look at Jesus of Nazareth.
Yep.
He was surrounded by some of those apostles were some powerful individuals.
Give me those numbers again, Nigel.
John the Baptist, he was a 3.3 initiate. Now, in those days...
That's it. That is the key. In those days,
he
would have been walking on water.
Well, I think he was.
He would have been floating, because back in those days, Now, did I read something many years ago that at a certain point in time, the 3rd-degree initiation was as high as people could go, and until the planetary logos developed some more, that they couldn't go any higher. So when you look at Jesus as a 4 and his disciples around that 3,
No wonder
they were saints.
No wonder the government didn't like them.
No wonder the priesthood didn't like them, because they would have been mucky old 0.5s, right? Grabbing money, drinking wine, and doing whatever they wanted.
And who are these guys, talking to the peasants and changing their perspective on life?
Jesus would have terrified the priesthood.
Absolutely.
And the power and the Romans.
Well, a couple of other apostles, Paul was a 3-degree initiate and Peter was a 3.5. Now, they've gone on to be masters.
Right.
So they, Jesus did surround himself with, capable lieutenants.
Yeah, and I'm going to look at Peter's empty chair because he's not with us this week, and he would be able to tell us
which masters they are.
Which masters they are now.
Where is he when we need him?
I know. Where are you, Peter? Come back to us.
All right. Now, on the last program, you talked about the need for courage.
Oh, did I? Oh, I'm terrified.
The need for,
yes, I did.
Yeah, it was one of Benjamin Creme's quotes that to change society, move forward, and stop putting up with inequality, racial
courage.
discrimination.
Yep.
I immediately thought of Malcolm X.
Oh.
African-American, he was a revolutionary. He was fearless. Have you ever seen any coverage of him and his speeches?
Yes, I have. I've watched some footage of him.
Courageous,
Yep.
what he was saying.
Yep.
No, in full knowledge that the FBI had constant 24/7 surveillance over him and his family. Mm-hmm. Incredible courage. He was assassinated in 1965. Back in 1950, he was in prison as a youth. He wrote a letter to President Harry Truman expressing his opposition to the Korean War. That was a courageous move. He was signing his name by that stage as Malcolm X. The X replaced the white slave master name of Little. He worked with Castro, Muhammad Ali, James Baldwin, and even Martin Luther King. Now, these two didn't always see eye to eye, but they briefly met in 1964 during the Senate debate on the Civil Rights Bill.
Yes.
He was also invited at that time to meet leaders of 3 African nations during the United Nations General Assembly. That was in 1960. And at that time, at that assembly, Castro invited him to visit Cuba after a private meeting at the same event. And if you look at any website regarding Malcolm X, there are schools in certain states of America that acknowledge him every year.
Yeah.
He is a celebrated civil rights campaigner.
I'm just checking the list now of initiates for James Baldwin because I was completely unaware of James Baldwin. And through the magic of Facebook, I keep getting quotes from him.
Yeah.
What an amazing man.
Yep. Well,
but he's not on our list of initiates, unfortunately.
Malcolm X, he was credited with raising the self-esteem of black Americans and reconnecting them with their heritage. Well, that's still going on today, John, isn't it?
That's what initiates and disciples should be doing, Nigel.
Yeah. It's courageous work.
It's courageous work, and it gets you killed.
And just to finish on Malcolm X...
There's no way I'll be getting killed, Nigel. Keep your head down.
We don't want any lead in the air, do we?
Mm-mm.
Okay. Malcolm X, many felt in America that he, especially the black population, many felt that he articulated the issue of inequality better than the mainstream civil rights movement. And so that's why he and Martin Luther King didn't always see eye to eye, because Martin Luther King was a little more conservative.
Yes. A little bit more concerned with peace, I think.
Because Malcolm X was a bit like...
A bit more aggressive.
Yes. And certainly was an aggressive orator, but such a skilled orator.
Yeah, yeah.
Nelson Mandela, he was pretty aggressive in his early years. He belonged to, what was it, the ANC?
Yes.
An illegal organisation as far as the white government in South Africa were concerned.
Yep.
And had to move out of the country at times in his operations. Went on to probably take at least one initiation through his 27 years behind bars.
Nelson Mandela was a 2-degree initiate. Martin Luther King was a 2-degree initiate. Malcolm X, 1.4. That is staggering because 1.4, you're still struggling in that deeply emotional state.
And he had a lot of relationships that
Nigel.
come and went.
What sort of relationships?
No, I'm talking about relationships with people in the civil rights movement.
So he kept falling out with people?
Yes, he did, because the astral centre wasn't under control.
Fiery, right? So 1.4. So Malcolm X, he would have been, and let me have a look, 4676. So he's a fourth ray soul. Really interesting. 6th-ray personality, obviously. 7 emotions, 6 physical, 7 physical, sorry. So 46767. Lots of ideology, lots of strength from his 7th degree, and a 4th and a ray 4 personality. Interesting.
Yes, and of course a lot of the artists and musicians are Ray 4, aren't they?
So Malcolm X is a 1.4, which is actually quite low when you consider he punched above his weight.
He really did, didn't he?
Martin Luther King at 2 and Mandela at 2, yes, they are getting it together on that point of evolution scale, right? But Malcolm X, that's amazing.
But it just shows you how Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, they really did rattle the cage in America.
Yeah.
They both were assassinated.
Both were assassinated.
Okay, I've got another comparison for you on initiates here. Charlie Chaplin. He was born on the 16th of April, 1889. He was an amazing character.
Yes.
He wrote, directed, produced, edited and starred in most of his movies, and composed the music for most of his films. Now, there's no other director today that can compare, possibly Clint Eastwood. He has become an amazing director who writes a lot of the music in his movies.
Really?
And is involved in the directing and the producing and the editing. So Clint Eastwood does come close. But when you think about Charlie Chaplin in the silent movie era, talk about groundbreaking. And he was a 1.6 initiate.
And again, you know, when we talk about...
Look at the impact he made.
Yeah.
Now, Chaplin and Hitler were born 4 days apart, both rising from poverty to world global influence. One made the world weep, one made the world shudder.
Yes.
The other made us laugh.
Yes.
And they were both acutely aware of each other during their lifetimes.
Oh, I know that Chaplin would have been aware of Hitler. Of course, Hitler would have been aware of Chaplin. Yes.
Yes, and Hitler had private viewings of Chaplin's movies, particularly The Great Dictator. That was the first movie that wasn't silent, and it was satirising
When
Hitler.
I first saw that movie, I could not believe it. I could not believe that was the real Charles Chaplin. I kept thinking this is a mock-up. This is, you know, it went above my head. It went over my head.
It's stunning, and that last 5-minute speech is relevant.
So relevant
today.
Yeah.
His most successful film was The Great Dictator, which concluded with that 5-minute speech against war and fascism.
Yeah.
In this world, there is room for everyone. This is a couple of quotes from that speech. In this world, there is room for everyone. More than cleverness, we need kindness and gentleness. Brutes have risen to power, but they lie. Not hard to think of an example of that.
All over the place, actually.
Greed has poisoned men's souls. So, you know, if you've never heard that speech, it's considered one of the most influential movies of all time, and gets fantastic reviews to this day.
Yeah.
Check it out, The Great Dictator.
Yeah.
Check it out online, Charles Chaplin. A 1.6 degree initiate, and Adolf Hitler, what was he, a 2 degree initiate?
I'm going to say 2.1, 2.2, I think.
Now, I need you to explain something here, because people
Nigel, for goodness sake.
People listening to this will think, how can Hitler be a 2 degree initiate and cause so much harm, so much devastation to other human beings? But it's that 3 degree initiate mark where you cannot be corrupted from that point on.
Yeah.
So corruption can still happen all the way through to
the
2.9.
No, well, Benjamin, I went to the conference in San Francisco 2010, 2011, I can't remember exactly, and Benjamin Cream gave a talk, and the talk was, even in our heart can fall. And an Ahad is a 4th degree initiate. right? So even when you are at the highest point in human evolution, before you step off the 4th degree into the 5th degree, which is a master, you can still stumble, right? And I suspect the forces of evil, as you climb higher up the evolutionary ladder, higher up the initiate ladder, maybe the forces of evil are taking pot shots at you.
Absolutely.
Because
there's more
Jesus
tension.
was tempted, right? In the Bible, Jesus was tempted.
The temptation of Christ.
Boom. So I suspect that once you get above the parapet in this global battle of good and evil, maybe the forces of evil start sending little boxes of chocolate your way, right? Because we know that Kennedy was flawed. We know that Gandhi had challenges. Churchill had challenges.
He was far from a perfect human being.
And he was a 3-something degree initiate.
3.1, 3.2.
Yeah. So, yes, you are not immune to temptation until you're above, I guess, that 4th degree into that 5th degree realm where actually you drop all the equipment that can be tempted, right? The physical, the mental, emotional, you've dropped it. So, yeah, it's a tough old task we're involved with, this evolution. All this information can be found on the Share International website, www.share-international.org, and also don't forget the podcasts, which are available on the Plains FM website.
We welcome your comments, questions and feedback. Please contact us at emergencenews@gmail.com.